Special Prosecutor Mark Piepmeyer was appointed to the case on August 26th. On September 24th, after his return from his vacation, Piepmeyer announced that the grand jury had refused to indict the officer Sean Williams and Sergeant David Darko for the murder of John Crawford III. During his press conference, he stated that the video they presented to the grand jury did not find that the officers had willfully killed John Crawford III without cause. The family had requested multiple times through their lawyer Michael Wright, along with the Ohio Student Association, to see the video while they were investigating the shooting. But Attorney General Mike DeWine refused to allow Walmart to release the video, stating that it was evidence that could possibly sway the grand jury in the case. Piepmeyer agreed, although he could have released the video as well, but suggested it would have tainted the judicial process. The BCI eventually took over the investigation and agreed that there were conflicting stories from the officers and what was on the video, but did not recommend charges for the officers. DeWine stated that he was no longer involved once the BCI took over the case and refused to comment further. The case was eventually investigated by the Department of Justice after the grand jury decided not to indict. The DOJ concluded its investigation in 2017 and announced that it declined to seek federal charges against Officer Sean Williams, who incidentally returned to full duty soon after, and Sergeant David Darko.
In memory of John Crawford III, cold-blooded murder set in motion by a white boy looking for excitement during his recreational Walmart walkabout. Yes, that's what he did for recreation. His 911 call, "There's a black guy pointing a gun at people," set in motion the sudden demise and sudden death of John Crawford III. A clarion distress call, reminiscent of the lies that set in motion the murder of Emmett Till. Another one of those white people lies that means a black man dies. Cops ran in and snatched Crawford's happy life into oblivion, shot him before he could blink, and set in motion more blood-drenched lies. He failed to drop the weapon after several repeated commands. He tried to run around the end of the aisle. He turned towards me and pointed a gun at me. The criminal injustice system set in motion its justified killing a darky playbook. Played it to perfection with bureaucratic delay and political maneuvering. After all, the Attorney General was running for re-election, was running for his lily white backers, was running back to 1955 May, Mississippi, while the media chimed in support for the murdering cop. While a special prosecutor led the grand jury to let the cops go free and then rubbed it in our faces. Referring to Ronald McDonald Ritchie, the Walmart tourist, as a guy who was trying to be a good citizen by calling 911 and reporting what he saw. In other words, telling a hatful of lies that lead to the death of a black man is being a good citizen in 2014, just like it was in 1955. And so it went, the downhill slide into the depth of injustice, through the local courts, through the Ohio Supreme Court, through the Department of Justice, highlighting the ideology screamed aloud with the bloody voice of raw dog white supremacy, that a black man has no rights, that a white man needs respect. We are not fooled, and though you drug out your hypocritical vile proceedings in the hopes that we who love black life would forget, we shall not. We shall not ever forget. We saw the video. Did you forget?
the 3rd, we could just, sit around and talk about some of the changes that are happening in our community and for African Americans, and specifically about, John Crawford. Malcolm X once quoted, he said, "Today they've taken off the white sheet and put on a police uniform. They've traded in bloodhounds for police dogs." Well, Monty, I'll ask you, is today's police department just a modern day form of slave patrol?
Yeah, the problem with the issue with white folks in power in general, in positions of power, is that they've never addressed their white supremacist legacy. And since the police is a direct descendant of slave patrols, that element is still real rich in policing, and it's evident, like some their actions, their behaviors, and even some of the comments they make when they encounter black people. Just treat them like they're runaway slaves, basically, instead of human beings. So they've never been able to overcome their attitude of dehumanizing black people. And when they encounter black folks in those situations, it's a real opportunity for them to express their disdain for black people. So no, they've never overcome that slave patrol mentality.
Now, I remember one time we were discussing something and you mentioned something that Cornel West said about humanity. Do you remember?
Yeah. It was probably about 3 years ago I heard Cornel West talking, and he said something that I thought which was quite profound at the time and still. And what he said was that the idea that black people are human is a relatively new idea, and that just really struck me, because it's really true.
Amnesty International stated, "No one should have to live in fear of those sworn to protect them." Cheryl, what do you think about the idea of the police serving and protecting, and do you think that also is happening for African Americans as well? What does serve and protect mean to African Americans?
Very little. In the black community, the obvious intention and policy of the police force is to protect property and serve the issues of white slumlords. For black people, it is a policy of contain, control, and kill. And that historically has been what they've done. Keep us away from everybody else by segregating us, control us by constant harassment, nuisance stops, lying about traffic stops and what have you, harassing black children on the streets, just keeping us under their thumb and in control. And when all else fails, to kill, murder a black person, just keep us aware that this is what they are capable of doing with impunity at any time.
Now, do you think that that's why the divide between black and white people trying to understand these killings of unarmed black people, do you think that the fact that they do serve and protect in white communities and not so much in black communities, do you think that's what's dividing us?
I think that's the smokescreen that they harbor, that they stand behind. You know, the fact that,
When you say they, who do you mean?
I mean, white Americans.
Okay.
White Americans always dissuade any discussion of the ill treatment of black people in the black community as the intentions of the police, that the police are there as they experience in their communities to protect them and take care of them, you know, to look out for the community. And they assume, or they say they assume, that's what happens in our community. If there wasn't so much crime, there wouldn't be so many deaths. This is kind of the way that they circumvent the truth.
Shortly after the incident when John Crawford was murdered, there was a gathering at Walmart of white people in support of the police.
I remember that.
And there was an interview with the news
Gabrielle
person.
Enright.
Yeah. And this woman said, she literally said, I support the police whether they did something wrong or not.
And she kept calling it an anti-police protest. And we
Yeah,
kept saying
it was-
that's not what this is.
Right. So it's as if she really supports the idea of police killing black folks for little or no reason at all.
Right.
You know, whether they're right or wrong, just the fact that you are a black person in a particular place at a particular time justifies you being murdered by police or some random vigilante white boy.
Right. You have no rights. It's like,
Now, I know you guys are familiar with Ella's song and the lyrics, and it states, "We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. Until the killing of black men, black mothers' sons is as important as the killing of white men, white mothers' sons." Bomani, will that ever happen?
So, I hate to sound cynical, but just looking at the height of the anti-black rhetoric today, I don't see that ever happening. I think we're caught up in just a long struggle, you know, to fight for our humanity. And I think in my mind, reaching that point is almost hopeless, you know, unless some miracle, you know, happens that touches the minds, hearts, and souls of the most radical anti-black extremists happens. So the other side of that, I think that's, you know, it's up to us to keep standing on our own, us as black people, to keep standing for our own humanity when nobody else will. You know, sometimes I remember watching this documentary of that Questlove did on the event, the musical event, concert in 1969, that same year as Woodstock. Mm-hmm. And just to see like all those black people gathered in the park and having fun, you know, and the respect and love they showed for entertainers, you know, it really. And then for some reason, I had just a flash like right alongside that with some of the violent events, the police brutality that's carried out against black people, you know, and it really brought tears to my eyes, you know. It's like, how can anyone not love black people? You know, when you think about the richness, the soulfulness, you know, the way we contribute to the culture, you know, that keeps things just kind of in balance, you know. I mean, up until recent years, you know, it's just, I just don't understand how anyone could maintain such hatred against such a beautiful people.
So keeping in mind what I just said about the lyrics of the Ella song, you've been an activist for decades. Do you think that activists have essentially become apathetic and we just need to accept that rest just will never come, Cheryl?
I think that activism is still relevant, and I think the activists are still passionate. I think what has happened is the impact of activism on the larger culture has diminished significantly, and it's deliberately been devalued as necessary and effective by mainstream media, by not just the right, but even the left at times, you know, essentially utilizing the tiny percentage of African Americans who have made significant gains in different areas as somehow the signal that activism is no longer needed, you know. But of course, it's needed more than ever right now. So, you know, all these years that I've been involved, I've never seen a time that's more inflammatory against black people. And the need for activism has escalated, in my opinion, in the last 10, 15 years rather than diminished. But the effectiveness of activism has diminished significantly because the insensitivity of the majority culture makes it almost not in any way effective. Quote yesterday that said, white America wants black culture, they just don't want black people, which is, you know, really significantly true. They want to take what we have and utilize it for themselves and not engage us at all or eliminate us.
You agree, Bomani?
Yeah, I have this saying that, you know, when it comes to music, entertainment, and you see how the legacy of white people appropriating black music and entertainment, that everybody wants to be black until it's time to be black.
Mm-hmm. George Floyd, I think it's called Justice and Policing Act, was created in 2021. It has yet to pass. Do you guys think it ever will? Will it pass? Is it necessary? Will it make a difference?
So it will only pass if we're able to dominate both the House and the Senate, you know, and vote out all these radical right politicians. You know, it's probably the only way it'll pass. And having said that, what that would take is like some real grassroots organizing and the dismantling of all these voter suppression efforts, including the redistricting, gerrymandering, so our votes will count. We'll have to vote all those suckers out and dominate the House and the Senate in order to pass policies that protect and promote the humanity of black people.
Cheryl?
Yeah, I agree. I don't see it passing. I don't think it's going to pass. I think that if you look at this from a historical perspective, during Reconstruction, the political machinery managed to construct obstructions to every act that was passed to help the free slaves. Every single avenue that would help them establish as citizens was blocked by legislatures from county, city, state, and federal. That's what's happened today. We have a political machinery that is already in place, geared to obstruct African Americans from retaining citizenship. We are being blasted out of our position as fellow American citizens in every respect. We're losing our rights. I don't see any way that machinery is going to be dismantled successfully enough for a bill like the George Floyd Act to pass. What I do hope, I truly hope, is that we can energize the black community, all black citizens, with the realization that our lives are at stake. Our existence is in danger. And if we don't come together, I think if we were to come together, all of us, and make a statement and make a stand and take some action, there would be much more incentive on behalf of the legislature to make a change.
Will it change anything? Will it make any difference in unarmed black people being killed?
Well, at least it would encourage the black community to be more cognizant of the need for safety, to protect black citizens, maybe withdraw from communities where they're not safe.
Monty? Will it change anything?
Probably very little. And as I was listening to Cheryl's comments, I was thinking when she mentioned that white folks, during Reconstruction, tried to dismantle every legal protection that had been erected for black people. In addition to that, every time we've kind of so-called won some sort of advancement, there's always been a backlash. So even if that were to pass, there would be, I think, some significant backlash. And if the intensity of the anti-black rhetoric, continues as it is today, that if it does pass, there's going to be a lot of the increase in political anti-black violence is going to increase right along with it, as backlash, because for some reason white people seem to feel threatened by any black advancement.
Back in the 60s, when the Black Panther Party came along, the initial inception of the party was rooted and grounded in political education. It was not only a necessity, it was a mandate. You learned the history of your struggle and the history of armed struggle in general. And then, after the leadership of the party was either exiled or jailed, there was this huge proliferation of Black Panther offices all over the country where no political education went on. People donned suits, berets, got guns, and called themselves Panthers. So there was a whole uneducated youth movement that went on at that time. And because they were young, they were under the impression they were invincible. And they had no principles to stand on. So I think that had there been an oversight, generational oversight of education, that it would have been a whole different story.
It's been 9 years since John Crawford was murdered. And we continue to memorialize him, and we continue to march and protest of the fact that there was never any justice for John Crawford. I know that they are still fighting with Walmart, and I think that they're trying before the end of the year to resolve that issue. Is it really, not is it important, but is it mandatory, necessary? Do we need to continue to memorialize John Crawford III and talk about his case?
So absolutely. One of the hopes and desires of like white supremacist efforts is that we will lay down, forget, turn a blind eye to these injustices, that we'll just forget it. Like even when we pressed for prosecution of Ronald Ritchie, the prosecutor said, I can't believe after 2 years people are like still doing this, because they want us to forget about it because they have no conscience. And just because they have no conscience doesn't mean there wasn't an injustice that occurred. And remembering John Crawford, the injustice that happened, against him, like we cannot allow people to forget and think that we're just going to lay down and accept what was done. Like they went, so I think it was the first time, like because of my involvement in that I had seen people put so much effort into going so far out of the way, to avoid justice. I mean, it's just like appalling, and they have absolutely no conscience, None of those legal actors have any conscience about what they did. It's just kind of like part of their day-to-day life, and we have to continue to refuse to accept that. Like, I mean, I'll never accept what was done to him by the people who perpetrated that injustice. It's something like I know I'll never forget it. I'll probably never forgive it, And I think this memorializing him is not just honoring his life, but it's also showing resistance, to anti-black violence perpetrated by the legal system. Yeah.
Cheryl?
Yeah, I'm totally in agreement with what Omani said. In my opinion, John Crawford III is this generation, this time period's Emmett Till. One of the things that was so prominent in the discussion of the Emmett Till murder was the fact that innocent blood was spilled. And that's the way it was here. This man did nothing to deserve to be murdered. Innocent blood was spilled, and then the forces of the law, forces of evil in my opinion, came together, circled the wagons, and determined that we will not allow justice to be served. We will take a stand against justice in favor of the murderous act that was performed on every level. The police, the prosecutor, the state, the governor, the attorney general, everybody circle your wagons and refuse to give this, and Walmart, I'll put them in there too. So yeah, I feel like we have to take a stand here. We have to draw a line here. We have to make this an issue, not just for this young black man, but for black people in general. We will not condone you deliberately taking our lives for no reason. So this is, in my opinion, ongoing from this point forward, never to be forgotten.
In your own words, and whoever wants to go first, that's fine. Why is it important to you that we continue to speak John Crawford III's name, continue to memorialize him, continue to fight for justice however we can?
Well, I think we need to remind people that a tragic murder happened. And not only did the tragic murder happen, but the criminal justice system stepped in to make sure that justice would not prevail. And this is what, we're dealing with. He could have done the right thing. Like he actually stood face to face with John Crawford's father just like this and said, I'm gonna do the right thing. And totally went on about doing everything but the right thing. And now he's governor. He's been rewarded. People need to be aware of the environment that we're living in and how much the John Crawford murder and how that case was handled mirrors what's going on, all around us. Locally, statewide, and nationally, we need to understand the connection. And particularly, the young people need to know what they're growing into.
Yeah, I feel the same way, and I feel like that instant when they murdered John Crawford III was a landmark. That was a landmark when Ohio had an opportunity to go either way. And the Attorney General led the race to injustice that followed. He aligned himself with the murderous policeman right off the top, right in the beginning. Then BCI followed suit. The prosecutor followed suit. There was no case.
And the Department of Justice.
And the Department of Justice. Right. No case presented on behalf of John Crawford. A case presented in defense of the police. And they made that choice right then and there. And they have gone down that line ever since with the decision to support murder of an innocent black man. I want to make mention of the quote on the back of your shirt. John Crawford III did nothing wrong. Nothing. He committed no crime. He accosted no person. He caused no disturbance. And yet he's dead. He's dead. And it is an injustice across the board any way you look. And it has to be, at some point, avenged. You can't let that go swept under the rug. Let this country forget that they murdered an innocent man for no reason whatsoever other than the color of his skin. That has to be avenged. You know, it's passed on generationally. Everybody, every black child should know the name of John Crawford III. In reverence and silence, we come to this place, hallowed ground and sacred space, a place consecrated by innocence and youth, a place still longing for justice and truth. 9 years later, and we come in pain, determined our efforts will not be in vain. Kasich and DeWine would cringe in shame every time they hear John Crawford's name. Parents committed by love and grief. Children maturing without any peace. We shall forever be by their side. Still justice delayed. Still justice denied. Young John Crawford should have never died.
2015, a year later, a protest to memorialize John Crawford III brought together hundreds of protesters and shut down the Beaver Creek Walmart store. Memorials have been held since 2015 by various organizations, including Black Lives Matter Miami Valley and other activists in the area. It is important to note that in the years following John Crawford III's murder, there were many nationally recognized murders of unarmed black people, including George Floyd. Various organizers were moved to march in support of John Crawford III, recognizing that the family never received justice, but his name would not be forgotten. John Crawford III was taken far too soon from his family, and although his memory lives on, there isn't a day that goes by that his parents, friends, and family don't mourn the loss of their beloved son, nephew, grandson, father, friend, and community member. Although most never met him and only knew that he was unjustly killed, he united a community to acknowledge police brutality and the numerous killings of unarmed black people in this country. It is important that we keep John Crawford III's memory alive for his two beautiful sons and family, but also as a reminder that it's clear that for a lot of the men and women on the police force, black lives don't matter. It is also important that John Crawford III's tragedy, murder, was not in vain. John Crawford Jr. and Tressa Sherrod are working hard to make sure that this tragedy will forever remain a beacon of light in the fight for justice against police brutality.